Hi and welcome. And tonight's book reading chapter is from the author based in New Zealand, Sofia Grey. Her book is the romance novel Seeing the Love, Friends to Lovers, Disability Romance, Love in Wellington. It's an ebook on Kindle. In a nutshell, these two characters, Natalie and Lucas, are co-workers, but they're based in different offices of the same company. And then their friendship developed into something else, potential love, but they haven't met before. And they have not disclosed their disabilities to each other. So I pick up from the chapter 12, I pick up where they actually meet for the first time, but it was an unexpected meeting. So the chapter is actually quite very intense. And just to explain, Sarah is the sister to Lucas, and Molly is Lucas's pet dog. Lucas's disability is blindness. He wasn't born blind. He's been losing his sight. And Natalie is a burn survivor from a car accident, and she's had all sorts of surgeries done on her, and struggles with her mobility and so on. It was the oddest thing. Lucas would swear he smelled a hint of lavender drift past him. His thoughts leaped straight to Natalie, just as light footsteps approached. Bonjour. You must be Lucas. For a fraction of a moment, he thought he was dreaming. The soft, lilting tone was so familiar. He had to be Natalie? He gazed in the direction of the voice, his heart thudding painfully. What was she doing here? F word. He wasn't ready for this. I saw Molly with the frisbee and guessed it was you. He wanted to see her. Dazzled by the bright sunlight, he couldn't even be sure where she stood. He angled his head and made his best guess. She sounded awkward, and panic filled him, crowding his lungs and tying his stomach in knots. I wasn't expecting you. I came early. There were things I wanted to do. Her voice changed direction, and he felt Molly shift position by his feet. Molly is beautiful. You're so lucky. She sounded wistful, and he flinched at the irony of her words. Had she guessed? Molly's harness lay on the bench next to him. She couldn't have missed it. You smell of lavender, he blurted, and felt his cheeks heat. Great. Now he sounded like an idiot. He braced himself for the rejection he knew was coming and sat up straight, his shoulders stiff. I'm glad I saw you here. I'm not staying for the conference, so I doubt we'll have time to meet up after all. Yeah, she knew. How effing pathetic was he to think she might be interested? He scrambled for something dignified to say and failed. She hadn't finished speaking. Hadn't she humiliated him enough? It was nice to see you at last. Let me know if you want to carry on with the lessons, but don't worry, I'll understand if you don't. Jesus. He longed for a giant hole to crawl into. Just go, Natalie. He ground the words out, his jaw rigid with tension. He stared at the ground and dug his fingers into Molly's fur. She whined, and he softened his grip. For Christ's sake, she was still there. Have a great trip to France. I hope you enjoy the sights. What? He focused all his efforts, all his energy, on maintaining his calm facade. Please go, he begged silently. Leave me the F alone. You get the most amazing view from the Eiffel Tower. Make sure you take a camera. She bumbled on, every word hammering another nail into his heart. He was surprised it was still breathing. Are you trying to be funny? The dark-haired woman interrupted Natalie's awkward speech, her tone icy. Have you taken lessons in being insulting, or does it come naturally? Sarah. Lucas sank his head in his hands and hunched over, as if in pain. Leave it, sis. Natalie stared at them both, bewildered. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she swallowed, trying to control her wayward emotions. She was giving him a way out. So, what had she done wrong? The woman stared as though she wanted to kill her where she stood, while Lucas wouldn't meet her eyes. I don't understand. Natalie's voice cracked. What do you mean? Just go, Natalie. Lucas sounded exhausted. Yeah, I should have told you, and I'm sorry. Okay? And forget the French lessons, eh? I think I've had enough now. He lifted his head slightly. Will you go grab Moll for me, Sarah? I'm going home. Natalie had been dismissed. She stood there, ignored by the pair of them, and twisted her sweating hands together, unable to believe what had just happened. Her stomach churned so violently she thought she'd be sick. She swayed and reached out a hand to grab the bench. Lucas's words replayed in her head. He should have told her what? Sarah fussed over the dog, fitting a complicated-looking harness on her, while Lucas stood, stretched, and rolled his shoulders in turn. She sucked in a shallow breath and tried again. I promise I'll go, and you won't hear from me again. But please, tell me what. The words died in her throat. Molly now wore a seeing eye harness, and Lucas had his hand closed around the grip. You're blind? She breathed. He froze at her words. You finished now? A muscle tickled in his cheek, and Natalie watched his free hand curl into a fist. Dear God, she'd hurt him, and that was the last thing she wanted to do. All the phone calls and emails that shared, and he'd never even hinted. Like I never told him about my scars. She had to fix this, and quickly. Sarah picked up a handbag, shot another killer glare at Natalie, and then turned to Lucas. Let's go get a drink. It was now or never. Natalie took a deep breath, scrambled her damp eyes, and stepped forward. She closed her hand around Lucas's arm. He flinched as though she'd hit him. I need to apologize to you. I made assumptions, and they were wrong. I'm sorry, Lucas. He flexed his fingers and lifted his chin, proud. I don't need your pity, Natalie. Save it for someone else. When she didn't move, he said, Take your hand out of me, please. She could hear the strain in his voice, and like a light bulb switching on in her head, she knew what she had to do. She held on to him. Lucas tamped down on his fury and snarled again. Let go of me. 1 minute, please, she sounded stressed. He wanted to laugh at the idiocy of the situation. She was going to think up some half-assed excuse. I had no idea. None at all. It was only when I saw you take hold of the harness. Huh? I was backing out because I didn't think you could possibly be interested in meeting me. I got cold feet. Her fingers loosened that death grip to rest slack across his arm. I wanted to have coffee with you, and if you can forgive me for my stupidity, I would still very much like to do that. It already felt as though his guts were spilling out across the pavement. Did he really want to sign up for another round of ritual self-humiliation? Nuh-uh. Lucas, please give me another chance. There are things I've been keeping from you too. We have the opportunity to be completely honest. Don't we owe each other that? Despite his better judgment, he paused. What things? Did she really have a boyfriend? A husband? To Lucas's surprise, she took his hand and lifted it with cool fingers. He heard the soft rustle of fabric, felt a whisper of the softest silk, and then she placed his hand, palm down, on her flesh. He almost jerked away in surprise, but she pressed down. holding him in place. "I've been hiding these," she whispered. Curious, he stroked his fingers up and down, her skin feeling strange welts and lumps and tiny indentations. What was he touching? "I have scars too, Lucas, and everyone can see mine." I hope you enjoyed this.